Trick Mafia. All right. I think we're back. Is this mic on?
Yep.
I'm Andrew, and I'm here with my crime partner. Hello.
Hello.
She's bouncing. She's gonna bounce for the. So we got the infamous Jess Frizzell, and then we have our special guest, our first special guest. So this is the first inaugural, entrant into the Weird Trick gang.
Thank you for having me. I'm Verónica López. Well, many of you know me as Maria Fibonacci. That's not my name. Maria is not my real name. Fibonacci is definitely not my real last name. A lot of people would say like, duh, of course it is not. But you would be surprised of the amount of new followers that I get that just like reply at me, like saying me, are you aware of how great your last name is? Like, well, that's not my real last name, but
but yes, I am aware.
But yeah, definitely, I am aware.
I actually had to type it into Twitter for it to display like that for
you. Yeah. I am so aware that I decided to adopt it, but yeah, Twitter.
So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, and we'll kind of walk through some of your story, and then we'll have some fun.
All right. So I'm a software engineer. I have been a software engineer for almost it depends, 8 years if you don't count before, 10 years if you do. So before getting into real software engineering, I used to code, but a different kind of code. I used to be a physicist. And when you're a physicist, you're supposed to be able to code, but it's very different. Performance is not as valued as in software engineering as correctness is. You could literally have any piece of code that you want to make something with, and it can run for hours or even days as long as it is accurate as possible. So I used to do that kind of work and simulations for either physics or other type of laboratories.
So what kind of simulations did you program?
So for example, for biophysics, for things in internal organs and things that you only have one chance to do in real life, or it can be really expensive to do them in real life. So you simulate them in a computer with very basic tools like Fortran. And actually, my first job was to translate Fortran code into Python code, and there was nothing creative about that process. And on my duties, I didn't have to innovate or put any new source of codes. It was just translation from Fortran to Python to make it more modern. Because physicists all around the world, not just in Mexico. Oh, by the way, I'm from Mexico City. Have Fortran because it works, and I think it's
and it's optimized for decades. And most of the libraries that these Python, all the linear algebra stuff at the bottom is implemented Fortran anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So it basically just works. And as I said, as a physicist, you have to know how to code, but not in the best way possible, and that's fine. So if it works, you don't have to fix it, So, but at the same time, with more people coming into the industry and with more tools, it's also important to stay in touch with what's new. So a lot of people wanted Python, and I helped them with Python.
So I used to do, in grad school, I used to do these simulations of the bioelectric fields in the torso.
That's right.
And then at some point, I kind of got disillusioned with academics. So I'm curious what your transition was from what you counted as the 2 years or whatever doing these kind of programs for physics to what you call real software engineering. So maybe describe a little bit about that.
All right. So at some point of doing simulations and that sort of work, I was still a student, but we at some point we did a mobile app for a lab that needed very basic stuff. And when people don't know the very like clear differences of all the areas in software, they just assume that you are able to code anything. So um, they basically assigned me that task as well. Like, oh, you're the girl that does the simulations. I mean, me and a couple of other guys in the team, but we need a very basic app with a login and to be able to, it was like an admin app. It was not like a science app or anything like that. So, but the fact is that they needed an Android app for general duties in the lab. And I did it with whatever I could. And that's when I started doing like mobile development. And when I did that, I asked my friends that were computer scientists at the time or were starting to become computer scientists at the time, like, what type of programming language do you need for this? What kind of tools and all that stuff. And back in the day, it was the early days of mobile. So it was very rudimentary Java for Android and very ugly interfaces. And I learned the hard way, and that was very fun. So I think that one thing like took me to another and another, and suddenly I started building a lot of mobile apps, and I started getting money, and which got me which was what eventually took me out of full-time physics. Because even though, like, full disclosure, I have never been in the real need of I didn't do it just for the economic part of it, but in order to become a real serious physicist, the ones that are like at CERN and stuff like that, you have to invest a lot of time and like in your career before seeing something like tangible, something productive. So I was just at the beginning.
You'll still be poor, and then you'll still be poor.
Probably because I mean I have always been good at math. I really enjoy it, but I think that I didn't shine as much in physics the way I can shine now whenever I want.
Yeah, because I mean, like, who else in physics can build mobile apps? Like, people must have been like amazed, that you like came out of nowhere and are like, I made this thing. Like, that's so.
Yeah, sort of like. Yeah, it was sort of like that. So yeah, basically I started getting like money out of it, and also like recognition and like an immediate reward, like I built this, I get this, you know what I mean? And in physics it's like you just study and work and work and work, and eventually your prize, your reward is huge and very rewarding, but maybe that's not what I wanted. So even though I continued like doing both things for a while, it became like a point where work was not sustainable to do with something else. Like I had to do it full time or go back to full time school.
This was all in Mexico, right?
Yeah, this is all in Mexico.
So how did you go from Mexico to Silicon Valley, and kind of what's the story there?
Okay, so my story with the United States and Silicon Valley in specific is like very recent, sort of. So in Mexico, even though we're not a tech hub, we do have a lot of tech. Our tech industry is big, but maybe not in the most fun way or in the most interesting type of jobs way. But it leaves a lot of money. So there are a lot of offshoring companies, a lot of digital agencies, stuff like that. So after doing some mobile development, this is very, very important to note. And I always say it in all of my talks. So please, if you have listeners seen like one of my talks, bear with me. I started doing mobile development, and the reason why I do distributed systems now, besides because I love it, but also because when you're a software engineer in Mexico, nowadays it's changing a little bit, but in Mexico and Latin America, since it's not a tech hub, when you are, for example, a backend developer, you are usually also responsible for servers and for a lot of stuff that a formal backend developer description involves, typically. So you have to be like very resourceful. Even though I have no idea how to do front end development, and I have never been like, besides the mobile development part, I have done like a couple of things. And you have to be sort of like a jack of all trades. And because when I did my mobile apps, at some point I became like an iOS and Android developer. I was not that good at iOS. And like clients would normally would expect you to build the entire thing. They didn't know that there was supposed to be like a person doing like a backend job or creating APIs or services or whatever, or that there was supposed to be a front end designing like all the workflows and all that. So there were very ugly apps, but they worked. And that's how I became familiar with the formal backend. Oh, at this time, instead of pursuing like my master's degree in physics topics, I decided to do it in computer science, because I was already working like almost full time in computer science stuff. And even though I knew how to code ever since like high school or stuff like that, I felt that I needed like the formality, at least for me. I'm not saying that everybody needs this, but like the way my brain works, I felt that I needed like this kind of structure, like to fill the gaps, you know.
So you got a master's in computer science?
No, I didn't finish it, but it was on the way. Yeah.
So like of like physics and mobile development and distributed system stuff, like what would you say you like find the most interesting or the most fun to work on?
Right now, distributed systems, without a doubt. It has always been a dream of mine, but like in the long future, to go back to physics, but like in a fun way. I wouldn't like it to be like my day job, because it's really, really, really stressful. Because even though like it doesn't matter how rich you are or poor you are, you depend a lot on grants or on like decisions made by other people.
So I have a to go back to physics when I have $100 million of my own to finance my own lab.
Yeah. Like I always joke about this, and please don't eye roll when you listen to this, but one of my physicist girlfriends, and I always used to say that our dream was to get married to someone super rich that would fund our physics research. Yeah, like that was our dream, and it is sort of her reality now. But it isn't mine. But yeah, whatever. The point is, yeah, that I really enjoy, to answer your question, Jess, yeah, like my favorite thing in life is like math, physics, but without making anything productive out of it.
Nice. It sounds fun though. Like I'd want to do that all day.
Yeah, but in terms of like real life and productivity and things that I can deliver, distributed systems, but it has to do a lot. I think that distributed systems at this time is still one of the few areas in computer science that is still very close to academia. Like it converges a lot. Like a lot of times that I have had to solve a very hard problem, like the only resort is to go back and read a couple of papers about it, or talk to a researcher about it, and then go back and implement it and convert it into something useful, you know?
Yeah, that's like actually what I love about it is like reading papers and stuff and seeing like the innovation is like very key.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not saying that it's the only way to do distributed systems, but it's just one of the approaches that has worked for me and the teams that I have worked at. And it's something that maybe like the type of problems and the way that you solve the problems is very similar to what I used to do in science, like the way that you have to put your ideas.
I would say most people have distributed systems, but they don't actually have much formality, and so they have these ad hoc, unpredictable things that they like.
Yeah.
Kind of hold together with human sweat and blood.
Yeah.
And bash.
Yeah, and a lot of bash. So one of the things you did kind of contribute to and were part of was CoreOS, and maybe you could talk a little bit about how you ended up there and some of the worked on and
So going a little bit back, so working in Latin America with all this resourcefulness that you have to have, basically, you have to work. There are very few tech companies as like the definition of tech company. So the tech jobs that you can get over there are usually for non-tech companies. So you are like part of the tech team for something else or whatever. So my point with this is that usually you don't have a technical boss, or your technical boss isn't an expert necessarily in what you're building. So my point with this is that many times when something is broken or something is very difficult, they don't care in a good way. Like, it's basically not their job to care. Like, they literally hire you to take care of it. So it doesn't matter if you're dealing with the most difficult problem with concurrency or distributed systems or whatever. They literally don't care, and you can explain to them, and it's not their job to understand, and it is your job to fix it regardless. So I came into concurrent and distributed systems out of necessity, and with this also to go and to distributed databases and all that, because I used to work at a digital agency that the job description was backend developer, backend web developer, and sometimes a little bit of mobile here, a little bit of systems there, but it was like mostly backend development with Python, which I never did, because it turns out that the products that they had started growing like super quick, and I didn't have a real background on that, a real experience in that. I mean, I had my education, but never like a hands-on experience to deal with like that amount of traffic, that amount of things in real life. And I never expected that to happen, because it's like, come on, it's a digital agency. Like, you just have to build shiny things, you know? But it turns out that like very specific things, like I'm gonna be like very short on this, but for example, there was a newsletter that we had to send. Well, it was a bank, so that the bank had to send, and every Friday. So all of our servers went like crazy on Friday, and nobody knew why. So I was like, oh, maybe it's this newsletter, because that newsletter contained like promos for vacation, for trips, for free movie tickets, stuff like that, you know? So everybody was just, and it was always like on a Friday at 2 p.m. So, and with a huge like fan base, user base. So our servers would go like bad. It was really, really bad. And since that was built in PHP, for example, it was gross. and well, sort of those problems.
The server farm? Like, how big is the backend? How many servers? What's the scale of what you're processing?
Oh, okay. So this was like in the cloud, but back in the day when it was not in the era of Cloud Native and Kubernetes and all the fancy things that we have right now. It was like rack space, and with just like, you could scale your infrastructure, but it cost you a lot of money. They were like complete servers. They were not just like pieces of server. So
I did time at Rackspace. So there like hundreds of servers, or
no, at the beginning it was just like literally like 5 servers. Okay. or even less, because normally they didn't need it. It was just like for concurrent transactions. But since this was a bank, this, you couldn't afford to be offline or to give like bad transactions or stuff like that. So stuff like that happened all the time, and I was not prepared for that. And so with a friend of mine, and he loves to do this kind of research and all that. So we started researching a lot of stuff, like what are we going to do, because we came to do like the most gross stuff ever in order to have these services available. Like, even one time, like I have shared this enough, so it's fine. But one time we had to like borrow servers from other websites that no one cared about, and that, well, of course their owners cared about, but their users like were not like in large volumes. So we took them down, and we use those servers for basic bank app transactions, because otherwise it would have gone down. And we didn't have, oh, this is another thing, like, yeah, I mentioned the rack space thing, and where you can scale your servers and it's very expensive, but that was not actually the problem. Like, the problem with Latin America is, like, again, since you don't have a boss that knows about this, you have to convince people to give you money. Like, you have to build your case for anything, like to buy a new computer, to buy a new server, to buy anything, a license or whatever. It's like, you really, really, really have to convince them. So if the day before they bought you a couple of servers, you cannot go back the next day and ask them for more, because it's like again and again and again. So, and we couldn't rebuild everything, that kind of chaos. So we had to borrow some servers from other websites and take them down, and nobody got hurt, and we kept our jobs and stuff like that. So
say they were other servers that the digital agency had control of that weren't to the client you were working for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just to load balance stuff. And yeah, and at the end of the day, we fixed that, and it was nobody knew about it. So I know this is completely unethical, but we had to do that. And well, after that, we decided that we cannot just live like that, and that type of software engineering is shitty. And we were like, we did an amazing team, that when you resonate, when your mind resonates with the other person's mind. So we were both like very invested into looking for alternatives and technologies to work with that could make our lives better, because at that point we were like permanently on call. Like, it wasn't called like that, but we were permanently on call, and we used to wake up like at 4 a.m. to restart a server or to restart a database process or something like that, So out of a lot of research, we knew Go, we discovered Go and Elixir. And so even though we fell in love with Elixir at first sight, we had to be like, we didn't have we didn't have like a huge team, and we had to train them. So with Go, this was very, very easy. Like, everybody could be very productive regardless of their backgrounds. We had a lot of self-taught programmers that didn't necessarily have like all that functional programming experience and those fancy things, and we just wanted to be productive like right away. So that's how we discovered Go, and immediately we started implementing everything. We couldn't afford to rebuild everything, but like the most, like, this was like 5 years ago, so I don't remember the exact points, but yeah. So we migrated into distributed systems, into like slowly, and then the guy was like, "Hey, have you heard about containers?" and stuff. So it was very, very organic. It wasn't like out of like passion or buzz or buzzwords or whatever. It was just like literally saving our lives, like saving our jobs, and we weren't like paid like huge salaries so that we could be on calls. Like, nobody cared if we were on call or not. Like, they cared that everything was running. And literally, when we adopted all these new technologies, our lives changed. Like, we didn't have to wake up in the middle of the night anymore, stuff like that. So for me, it was very, very interesting. It was like the very first time that my work had a direct impact into what the business did. And also because, like, after acquiring like I don't know, dozens of servers, we eventually we didn't need them anymore, because with all these new tools, like, and our code was more efficient, our websites and everything was more efficient.
So you did projects with Elixir and Go, or just Go?
No, just with Go. So I love Elixir, and I have always used it like as my side chick.
So lots of what people are trying to do with their kind of microservice architectures is rebuilding features that are built into the Veeam VM.
I know, yeah, definitely. No, like, don't get me wrong. My Go peeps will kill me for this, but uh, don't get me wrong. If I could, I would have picked Elixir like 1,000 times over Go. But if it were just like on the technical side, but you also have to make decisions on the human side and the business constraints, the time limits, stuff like that. I mean, Go is an amazing tool, but if I had to decide, yeah, definitely. Like, uh, can you quote yourself on what you said about all the microservice, or how did you say it? Do you remember?
So there's an old tweet that's basically a twist on Greenspung's law, which is a comment about how every program has like a half implemented bug-ridden Lisp.
Yeah.
I made a version of that as every microservice deployment, and it's on Twitter. We can go look it up. It's like half implemented, bug-ridden implementation of Erlang.
Yeah, so I love it. It's just like it resonated with every single cell on my body. So yeah, for those of you who don't know, like, Elixir is like the new Erlang, but they share the beam, is like the virtual machine, and it's amazing. And a lot of things that we build in the distributed systems world nowadays is basically just re-implementations of what those languages have built in. So that's why I
love
love
watching Joe Armstrong's talk about reliable systems and systems that don't stop. I don't know if you've ever watched any of those.
Yes.
You can put them in the show notes, but like that, they solved all these problems, 20 years ago.
I know, and I have seen people like coming. I don't know if you know Joe Armstrong, that many people call Joe Erlang.
Yeah, I follow him on Twitter. I actually really have been like kind of now swayed towards Erlang.
Yeah, you should. So I have seen people like live talking to him about containers and how innovative they are, and it's just like cringeworthy because it's like no. Because I get both sides points, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, I work with containers and it's amazing and I love it, but also you're trying to explain containers to that guy. It's just like, just shut up.
I mean, I like when people, call out the buzzwords. Like, I like when you said that you didn't use containers because it was a buzzword. Like, that's also how I was introduced to containers. Like, I actually was using Elixir, which were like shittier than Docker. So it's nice, like, use things for the right reason versus like, we need Kubernetes
Yeah.
to deploy.
But realistically, all containers they're not real. They're just processes that pretend like they're all alone. And Erlang's like whole model is based on these isolated processes. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's isolated at the language level, which I actually like a lot better. It's like the JavaScript V8 isolates, which are cool.
Yeah, only more powerful. But no, yeah.
How'd you get to Silicon Valley?
Okay, so after that, I started looking for more interesting jobs. And because here in Mexico and Latin America, as I described the type of jobs that you could get, nowadays you could get like much better ones, but it's still in progress. It's still a work in progress. But yeah, so I started looking and I found a lot of opportunities on remote, like working remote, still being able to be in Mexico City, but working for American companies. So that was fun. They were like basically consultancies, nothing too fancy, but at least like I could expand my portfolio into like American clients and American things, which was like a limitation for me before. But because before this, I tried to apply like to a couple of startups in San Francisco, and they were like, "No, you don't have any shiny experience." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And I still think, like, I honestly, super honestly think that those years in working in Mexico City in that type of jobs taught me the most, because I had to deal with every sort of monster that you can imagine and survive it. And now in Silicon Valley and in American companies, my job is fancier. Like, what I mean with this is that I get to, yeah, it's awesome that you can reach a lot of people in projects with a lot of impact, like with CoreOS and etcd and stuff like that, like Kubernetes, of course. But the things that you build is like in a totally controlled environment, in a fun environment where you can ask for resources and they're given to you. You know what I mean? It's like, it's a way different type of experience. So I don't have to struggle. Like I have to struggle with other type of nightmares, but but they're usually not technical ones.
So there's kind of two sides to being in a wasteful or pathological situation. There's the waste of having too much, and then there's the waste of having too little. And
exactly. Exactly. So, but I love both experiences, but yeah, in the most pampered environments, I have learned a lot of stuff, but not through experience. I have always learned it like seeing someone else or after reading the postmortem or stuff like that. Of course, I have been like in very stressful situations, specifically when I have been on call or stuff like that. But it's different. It's like a different type of experience. So yeah.
what do you want to do? What do you want to do now?
What I want to do now. So basically, after working with American companies, but from Mexico City, I started like recruiters started reaching out because I was finally like I finally had the shining experience to contribute to them, and I was like, oh, I really want to stay in Mexico because like opposite to the stereotype, I really, really, really love my country, and I really, really, really want to live there like for forever. But like there are some politics and some things like you cannot get the best jobs in tech right now, you know? So I was like, okay. So I did my best to try to work remotely, but the type of jobs that I could get like that were like a little bit not as fun as the ones that I wanted. So I was like, okay, it's time to immigrate. So before that, since it always comes down to a boy or a man. I hate this, but before I moved for good on my own, I used to date a guy that lived in Sunnyvale in Bay Area. So since I was working remotely, I used to travel a lot. I could travel a lot to visit him. And so there, I spent there like 2 years or so, almost living there. And so I basically lived there, and that was really helpful for my career because I could go to meetups, I could go to any sort of, and also the informal things. Like I met people, I met Jess, I met I met a lot of folks that would suddenly invite me to work out of their offices or have lunch at their offices, and you create a network. And so when I interviewed for CoreOS and I made it and I literally moved like one day before starting the job because I was already very familiar with the area. It is so close to Mexico City. It's like a 4-hour flight or 3.5. It's super, super close. So I was already very connected with the area and with the industry and how everything works there. So yeah, and then I worked there, and I really wanted to stay there for a very long time. I was like, yeah, I'm getting older. I'm almost 30. So I was like, yeah, it's like this has to happen. I have to be there like for some years now. But then we got acquired, and then our acquisition wasn't like the most ideal thing for everyone. And then everyone started immigrating to other jobs, and I swear I tried to stay like as much as I could, but there was a point where our office was so sad, was so empty, that one of our coworkers was totally lonely on her floor, and the lights would turn off because because they didn't sense any movement.
Oh my God.
So she periodically had to like go get a snack or go to the restroom or something in order for the lights to go on.
That's insane. So she was the only one on the floor?
Yeah, it was.
Oh my God! Then just move over to the other floor maybe, so that she could be with people.
No, because like her job was like, we had 2 floors, and the floor she was at, it was like the open floor where we could get guests. It was the door was open. So in the second floor, it was all the engineers and all that stuff, and our door was closed, so it didn't have access for the guests. So someone had to be there. So, yeah, it was very sad. Yeah, so as in any acquisition transition, it was rough for some of us. I've heard that they're doing really well now with a new team, like after going through a rough patch. Because at some point nobody wanted to interview there because they heard like horrible things from us. But I think that time settled everything, and now there are a lot of people.
It's where you come from, and you have certain expectations about the culture and the work.
Exactly. Yeah. It was definitely like a cultural change in like Red Hat, even though it's a huge company. It's still not based in the Bay Area. So the cultural changes in every single aspect were very different as to getting acquired by a similar sized company, but based in the Bay Area. And I won't tell you more details about that, but it was definitely like a cultural shock for
you
us.
decided to immigrate, but you didn't have a place to immigrate to.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, no, like, as I said, first of all, I didn't want to leave. Like, I really want to stay there as much as I could. But I started seeing people go. And once I started seeing important people go, like key people, like amazing engineers that built the entirety of CoreOS, that if you look for their names right now, they appear in every single Kubernetes thing in history. Once they started leaving, I was like, maybe I should leave. But I somehow wasn't like very invested into interviewing and all that. As a personal note, I practice mindfulness, or I try to practice mindfulness like on a more, not in the productivity way, but like in a more like spiritual way. So I try to focus all my energy into like one thing at a time, one important thing at a time. So I was like, okay, right now I work at an amazing company that used to be an amazing team. I made incredible friends there. So if I'm just going to move, and also like a very important thing, like I'm an immigrant, so I need a visa for a new job. It's not like I just transfer to another job right now. So a full process has to go after you decide to move to another company. So I was like, okay, so I don't want to move, but I eventually decided to move. But I didn't know where to. Some people started going to some sort of company that didn't resonate with my values, and I started getting pickier and pickier and pickier. And then all this like politics issue with ICE and the immigrants at the border and stuff like that. So I was like, I am a very like, I never cry. I am a very like strong, tough person, but I think that topic, like the immigration thing, is the one topic in the world that really like tears my heart apart. So I was like, oh my God, no, I cannot work at any of these companies. And it was not even about them. It was about me. It was like, I wouldn't feel like good. I would feel like dirty with myself if I contributed to something that contributes directly or indirectly to that, you know? I know that every company has its thing, but for me, that was the thing where I crossed the line. So a lot of companies working with containers, with the hot stuff that I can be employable right now, are unfortunately the ones that I cannot work with on a values level, you know. So I decided to take a time off, and also like technology-wise, this is my experience. I'm not saying it is the way it is, you know, the absolute truth, but the way I saw it back then was that amazing companies with a lot of money that could pay me like a decent salary, because salaries are important, or with an amazing culture where I could feel respected, because let's think about that too. As a double minority, that is also something that I have to keep in mind. So those type of companies didn't have the most interesting technology for me. And on the other side, the companies with the most interesting technology for me didn't have enough money to pay me, or were one of these with the value issues, or maybe we're not in a position to hire like someone that required a visa. So it was like a lot of things to think about. And I really wanted, as I said, I'm getting older, so I didn't want just to land any job. Like my next thing that I want to do is like be able to stay at the same place like for a considerable time, and just make a career inside, and eventually, because I want to go back to Mexico at some point. So for me, it just doesn't like work like to skip into another startup and into another startup and stuff like that without doing or building something meaningful, you know?
So you want to build something meaningful, but you have aspirations to take what you're learning and kind of go back to Mexico. Like, what do you think the possibilities of building up, or what have you seen? I mean, you gave us a bit of a story about this experience in the digital agency and made some comments about the kind of the work in progress. So what would that work in progress evolve to, or what would you like to see that? What would you like to play in that too?
So I would love to see, first of all, I'm not very entrepreneurial in the sense of like, I have never ever wanted to create my own company, like never. I don't know why, but my entrepreneurship is always
because you're a sane person.
I'm a very lazy person. But no, like my entrepreneurship is always like on creative things on where I'm working, but I don't want to create my own company. But so to answer your question, what I would love to see like in Mexico specifically, or Latin America in general, is to see like startups or where something is created. Like, for example, let's say like Prometheus, you know, that it was created by Julius in Berlin and in Germany, and everything is connected to that place. And now everybody uses that. Everybody uses Prometheus, and there are user groups everywhere. Yet the main hub for Prometheus is like still at CoreOS in Berlin. You know, that's the main office that works with Prometheus. So I would love to see something like that, you know, like a product coming out of Mexico that everybody uses or that becomes mainstream or something like that. Not even like a company in like full company. That would be awesome. But like with a product, that would be like my favorite thing ever. And I would love to contribute to that. Or I don't know, maybe I think that given the case, like if I get inspired enough, I could get the entrepreneurial bug. But it's definitely not something that I am thinking about right now. But like, and when I say that I want to go back to Mexico, it's not like in the immediate future. It's like maybe I could take like 2 years, or maybe it could be 5 years or 7 years. I don't know. But what I definitely don't want to do is like buy a house and have kids and just like and get a green card and get a citizenship. No, I that's not like in my interest. I mean, I love America. Americans have been great to me, like except for a couple, but but no, in general, I really like your country, and yeah. So let's see how it goes. But yeah, in the meantime, I would like my next step. I would definitely love to be there, ideally in San Francisco or New York, and with something meaningful in every single way, like in the social aspect, in the tech aspect, etc. Not just for the sake of being in the United States, because if I got like a non-meaningful or impactful role, I could just go back to Mexico and just get I don't know, a VP of engineering role or or something like that didn't excite me, but you know.
That makes sense. I also feel the social impact, you know, it can't just be like some cool technological thing. I really like social impact.
Yeah, and what I've seen in this cloud native micro bubble is that when people care about the social impact, usually it also has like a very big technical impact. Yeah. Because like the humans involved in it, like you can see the love or the passion that they put into the project. So that evolves into like something getting popular. That's what I have seen. So
for sure, I totally agree. And I think that the ones that don't have that, like they lack the care and the the love, the passion of doing it, honestly.
yes, definitely. You can see it. You can see how they take care of like as maintainers, or as the future of the project, or as like what type of decisions they make, business oriented, like that, that they have to make business decisions without a doubt, but the type of decisions, stuff like that.
Totally.
You've shared this journey that you've kind of been on, and without putting too much value judgment on it, like we live a very privileged life, like all of us being able to talk and the stuff we're sharing. There's a bunch of people that don't have these same kind of privileges. So looking at the big picture, and maybe someone will watch this from Mexico or from some of these other countries, what kind of advice would you have for someone who's coming up in that environment right now for the kind of like their career and what they should be thinking about, what they should be doing?
Well, first of all, for immigrants is to learn English. I was, first of all, very privileged to speak English since I was a kid, because of my parents' job and the way we grew up and stuff like that, which is totally not the norm in Mexico. And so first of all, learn English. That's like out of discussion. Then second of all, just be very persistent. I am just talking about my experience. I'm not saying that this is the only way, because sometimes people get mad at me because of this. But since I was a kid, I am very, very, very persistent. Like it doesn't like, I don't get broken like very easily. So when people say no, it's just like, okay, so next. And people sometimes like in this industry can get like easily hurt by rejection, and either by companies or all the mess when you reject a PR. How people react so emotionally. So yeah, stuff like that. Like be very like resilient and don't take things personal. At the end of the day, it's just a job. It's an amazing job, and this might sound like counterintuitive to the goal of this, but I think that a path to success in this is like to treat it as a job, because it is just a job, and then have like the time to invest in your personal growth, because I have found that has made me a better engineer. Like whenever I'm really not that type of person that has like 17 side projects and codes like on Saturdays and Sundays. I'm definitely not like that. But whenever I have been like that, like in short periods of time, I don't feel at my best. Like I don't sleep well, and if I don't sleep well, I cannot solve problems well. Like I have seen this trend going more popular every time, and I am very happy. Like the more senior the engineers are, at least the ones that I've met, always recommend to sleep. Like sleep on it, and you will see that the next day it will be so easy for you to solve something, or at least you wouldn't be as burned out. And I think that at the beginning, I started in the industry like almost 10 years ago, and we still had a stereotype of like, yeah, you have to work after hours and don't sleep, and how Steve Jobs and Marisa Mayer only sleep 4 hours a day and stuff like that. So that definitely hasn't been my path, and I think I consider myself like successful in that matter. So I wouldn't recommend following the stereotypes if that don't work for you.
So you mentioned this idea of kind of creating projects and being part of it, and I know this was at least some of your story, but just maybe to make it even more fine point and more explicit, like what would you recommend for people to get involved in the open source communities? Like there's lots of ways people can get involved from anywhere in the world if they want to.
Yeah, definitely. So the way that it has been for me is more than creating PRs or starting with a project or stuff like that I think that works, but it hasn't been my path, is like getting more into the conversations, the important conversations, like look like who's building what, and try to make it into meetups, try to make it into events, dinners, or whatever. Networking for me has been like critical. So once you find that out, or get involved, like for example in communities, like organize your own meetup, organize your own even if it's a one-time only thing, and you can connect with sponsors, you can connect with people that may want to give a talk remotely or stuff like that. Like you have to be very resourceful, especially if you don't grow up like inside the bubble. So after that, just start being part of the conversations. Like something that happened to me a lot was that I used to feel very intimidated, and it was my responsibility. Like no one gave me any reason to feel like that. But I used to feel like, for the sheer reason of not being American or not being part of the bubble, I didn't know as much as everyone did. So when we were like having technical conversations, even if I were talking like with people my age or people with the same years of experience, I would like started to get intimidated and just like, I don't know, just agreeing with the echo chamber. And then as soon as I started getting more comfortable in this environment, I started like adding my own ideas into the conversation. And that was like day and night. Like after I embraced that, I started giving better talks. Oh, that's another thing. Like if that's the thing that you like, despite what the internet is saying right now, just like go to conferences, give talks, and take advantage of that. At the beginning, since I'm a double minority, and I will say like it is, a lot of people invited me to give talks, and that would benefit like both of us, like the event, because they would have me and me because I would have that exposure. So I always said yes. Like my first talks were like crap. I was too nervous. I didn't bring anything new to the table. At the best, like my first talks, like the best ones were just repeating something that I read. Now, I think that I never said something that was false or wrong, but they didn't bring anything new to the table. However, like with the practice and being persistent, and I was never afraid and I was never ashamed. Like I was very like conscious. You also have to be very self-aware. I never expected me to be like the most favorite keynote speaker at those times, you know. But I was there and I persisted, and yeah, I was never ashamed. But that gave me like the network and the experience to be able to do it like much better now. And it is also like what I said, back in the day, people would tell me like, oh, you should talk about this topic or this and this and this, specifically when I worked at some places, you know, that people trying to help, but they didn't help that much. So now that I talk about the topics that I bring to the table, that are topics that no one or very few people talk about, where I can really like bring something new into the discussion, it feels amazing. But I couldn't have done that without going through the first years.
Absolutely. Two quick comments. The fact that, like, for the most part, there's a very high benefit to just saying the same things over and over, even if you don't feel like you're bringing something new.
Yeah.
It's not advice to you, it's advice to everyone listening. Like there's lots of things that are being said over and over and over on lots of the conferences. And so you shouldn't feel like you have to add, you know, your PhD to the thing and bring new knowledge. Just say something in your way, in a way that matters to you. And then the second thing, and maybe even the bigger thing, is representation matters so much. And for someone to see someone like them on the stage totally changes what they think is possible. So if you see someone that represents you, like, it will change your mental model of
definitely.
So take the advantage and give someone else that gift.
Yeah.
I was going to say the same thing about representation. And then also to your note about how, like, when you first gave talks, you were nervous, like stuff like that. Like, I can totally like relate. And I almost wonder, and it's like, dudes, like, no offense to anyone who's listening, but it seems like they don't necessarily have the same problem, although I know a few that do. But it's like, how do we solve that problem for new people coming into the industry? Because I'd love it if like people didn't have to feel that way when they get their first talk, or like entered a new community or space or something.
Yeah, no. So first of all, I totally agree with Andrew when you say that you don't have to bring something totally innovative into the conversation. Like it can be just like presentations. But what I mean with that is that I wasn't even doing a good job with that, you know? So I was just like nervous and internationally speaking. It was just a lot, but I was brave. So in terms of representation, I think that you should go for it. Like if you're a woman, specifically, I get very passionate about, of course, Latinas and Black women, because like we are the less represented in the industry. So yeah, if you listen to this, please reach out to me and I will give you tips. Like literally, my only tip to overcome that was like being really brave. I didn't have any other ritual or magical tips to overcome that. It was just like being shameless. And I do read the comments sometimes, but I don't take them like personally. Like there was just this one time when a guy was actually racist to me, like literally like straight racist, but it was on Reddit. And it didn't even hurt me. I was just very angry because that isn't supposed to happen. I was just like, what if someone else, like someone like with that do take things personally, or someone younger, it would have literally destroyed them. So, and bottom line, it doesn't depend on your reaction. It shouldn't be like tolerated. Like to be there, like for someone to have the nerve not just to think about it, but to actually open your computer and write about it, and even after you wrote about it, think that is still reasonable to post it. It's just like, dude, you have problems. But other than that, like you should go for it. And if you're not Latina and you're not Black, it's fine. You can also ask me for advice or for encouragement. I will totally give you that. But I don't know. And what else? You also mentioned something, Jess. Like, yeah.
I mean, I think that solved my question.
Okay.
Yeah. I actually feel like this was probably good for an episode. But it would, like, when you get your dream job, we need you to come back and then tell us.
Of course.
Yeah. And if there's anything else that you'd like to add to.
Well, I am very close to leaving the Fun Employment Club. And so it is so sad because, well, it's obviously a good thing to get a job, because in my context, getting that job means that I'm getting what I want. But it would also be very sad because now I have seen a lot of people embracing the being unemployed thing, because like, just to be very, very, very clear, like this type of unemployment where when you decided to do it, that you started like not feeling happy or getting like burned out and starting like saving all your money, like every single like check for your future, or getting into strategies. Like what I mean with this is like, it's a thought decision. It's not like a rage quit thing or stuff like that. Even if you wanted to rage quit at some point, but like a planned thing that if it works for you, it works for you. If it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. I mean, I'm the type of person that could totally do nothing in a day. And then, but this is also very important. Like, you don't need to be like unemployed for a very long time to realize this. Like, I haven't been totally like out of the loop. Like I am working on some Kubernetes things for Latin America that are supposed to go out like in a month or so. But in order to do that, I had to leave my previous job. Like there was no way I could have
be more productive.
Yeah. And at some point I started thinking about leaving the Kubernetes and Cloud Native space because I was just so fed up of it. But now that I had the chance to work on it voluntarily and by contract and in my own pace and with a purpose in mind, I find it amazing again, and I found the passion that I needed again for that type of role. So the thing that I am getting involved right now is totally in that space because I am good at it, and it took like that time away from the typical job to be able to realize that I really love it and that I am good at it and that I will be super happy to go back to the same space. So if that works for you, that works for you. If it doesn't, it doesn't, and it's fine. And that's it.
Yeah.
Every path is valuable, and respect your path.
Yes. People should be themselves. I feel strongly about that.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing time with us.
No, thank you for inviting me. It has been very fun. You two are very fun. And seeing Jess like bouncing on the ball is amazing because it's like an emoji that when she gets serious, she bounces less. And when she gets excited, it's like she bounces a lot.
Whoever has to work with me next is going to have to put up with this ball.
It's amazing.
I think we'll just bounce until we invite you back for next time.
Yay!
Yes.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to click the button.